Okay, in this video, we're going to offer some tips and tricks you're going to use if you have a dog that's human aggressive. Now, all aggression really comes from stress, and in this house we have a boxer mix named Carl, who's a great dog, and once he gets to know you, he's a lover. But he is, I think, very confused about his position in the house, and so we spent a good portion of the session talking about a whole lot of little things that the guardians can do to help flip the leader-follower dynamic. In this video, we're going to talk about things that guests can do when they come over and how to create a positive association with guests coming in, and so Carl can practice non-aggressive behavior. Now, without getting too in the weeds, we have neurons in our brain that travel down a neural pathway, and the more that dogs practice behavior, just like us, the more I play guitar, the faster and better at guitar I get. Dogs can get better at aggression. And I think that the guardians inadvertently have been reinforcing some things they don't want, and that's why we spent a lot of time off camera talking about it. In this video, I want to just basically focus on people who come over and what they can do. Now, the guardians can set Carl up for success by doing some things before the humans actually arrive. So the first thing we want to do is increase his exercise. And I talked about a number of creative ways to do that. I'd like the guardians, the stairs I think are going to be probably the money maker for Carl. So before the guests come over, we want to exercise him about 50% of his maximum. And we want to make sure that Carl has about 15 to 20 minutes after the exercise ends before the guest comes in, so he gets a chance to cool down. If you exercise the heck out of a dog and then put him in a jackpot situation, that's going to be worse. So basically, we're going to make sure Carl's in a position to succeed by addressing his energy. Now, when guests come in, I like the guardian to get something along these lines, which is full of treats. Now, the treats I like using are chicken liver. And remember, don't leave the bag open like that because they will dry out really quickly. And the smell is everything. We want them to be fresh and juicy, so squishy, because they're going to have the strongest smell. These are far superior to Zooks because of the strong smell that they have. And we want the highest value thing we possibly can for Carl to give him every advantage. So when the guest comes over, we can do a couple things. So basically what I would do is we're going to give the guests this, so they're going to have this. Now, one of the things I recommend the guardians do is drill a pilot hole in one of these suckers really low and put an eyelet in there and get a chain leash that's about 4 feet long or 6 feet long. So Carl has the ability, there's a dog bed right here. He can go here and he has a 6-foot boundary. This way the guests can come in and sit down on the couch and there's no way that Carl can get to them. Now Carl's going to forget about it and lurch at them. That'll happen a little bit, but after a while, he should get better and better at it as all the other things we addressed in the session take hold. But it'll also help your guest feel better knowing that Carl cannot get to them. So basically what we want to do is when people come to the door, Carl is really excited for the door. And he thinks that his job is to protect his humans. And so he runs the door, and he barks, and he jumps up, and he's out of sorts. Well, one of the things that I like to do, and this house is actually ideal for it because we actually have a kind of a sun port, so we're not on the elements. So what I'd like, you could, and I'm going to kind of come up with 2 different scenarios so you can tell the guest which scenario they actually want to go through. One of the scenarios would be actually have the guest come to the door, and this would be ideal. Do you guys have like a neighbor or 2 that you're friendly with? Yeah. They could help us out with this? So what we want to do is, I would have the person come over and have them text you ahead of time so you're prepared for it. And again, exercise Carl properly. So basically what we do is we have Carl come to the people come to the door, and they're going to knock on the door or ring the doorbell. Now, we can set Carl up for success before this by practicing having him moving away from the door to this spot when using classical conditioning. So when we do this, when people are at the door, that's going to be too exciting. So for what we want to do is just when we're just relaxed, and nobody's here, have a treat, throw it over here, and when Carl goes over there, you could actually just knock on the table or the wall. Yeah, Carl. So he thinks somebody's about to come in. So what we do is we throw the treat here. He runs over and the second he licks it up, that's when we do 1 knock on the table. And he's going to stop and he's going to race at the door. But nobody comes in the door. And we're doing this is before we don't even have the neighbor or anybody there. And then once he settles down, throw another treat over here and keep doing this until you'll notice that he'll start lingering here and walking to the door instead of running to the door. And eventually he'll just kind of come over here. And eventually he'll get to the point where he can knock and he'll come over here. When he does that, then you're going to throw the treat. And again, you need to make sure you're doing this when nobody's knocking at the door so he doesn't get confused. There's a little bit of counter conditioning, but it's really classical conditioning is teaching him coming here causes treats to, when they hear the knock at the door, treats are over here. So we want to first condition him to go over here. So when somebody does come to the door, and we want to assign a command word for this. So I would say like ocean, or some tranquil, Jamaica, Hawaii, or some fun word. Every time he looks up the tree, you say Hawaii. And so after a while, when you go to the door and somebody's there, you could say Hawaii. Now that means he'll understand that you want him to go here. Doesn't mean he will want to do that. So this is where having a neighbor come by could help. So you could have the neighbor come by and come to the door, and they knock on the door, and this is going to be a different sound than here, but he's already kind of associated here, and we have to practice an easy version. So you have the neighbor come over and knock, and then Carl's over there, and you have somebody over here with a treat, and just drop a treat. And Carl and the neighbor is not going to ever come in for this. This is why I want to use a neighbor, so they can come by real quick and spend 5 minutes doing this. So now we're triggering the response, and you could actually do this yourselves, having one of you there. Just make sure he doesn't see who it is. And basically, the knock eventually means come over here. And then the next stage is we want to actually start tethering him to the leash here. Now, tethering a dog can create some frustration. So again, we want to set him up for success by exercising him first. So basically what we do is we have the knock at the door, he comes over here, we attach it, then we go over to the door, and this is where we're going to have your neighbor come in. Now the neighbor knows he can't get past whatever the line is, and you're going to give your neighbor one of these with a whole bunch of the Tricky Trainer chicken liver treats. And you're going to have the neighbor sit right there, and Carl's going to be snarling and doing all these things. We're going to ignore him. Don't look at him. Maybe have a little cheese tray, give your neighbor some wine, be a good host, and wait for Carl to settle down. And he's going to be all crazy. Don't even look at him. Any look is validating. When Carl finally sets down, have your neighbor pull one of these treats out and throw it over there on the dog bed. Don't tell him to do it. Just kind of, when you open it up, Carl will be watching him. A nice little lob and comes over here. And make sure that the chain is long enough so that Carl can actually get over to the dog bed or move the dog bed a little bit closer here. And so that Carl goes over here, and you've already, and message me if I forget to put it in here, how to treat your dog to go there. I already showed you, but if you have a refresher. And so the idea is the neighbor is conditioning and rewarding Carl for going to the dog bed instead of going and lunging towards me. Now, another option that you could do is have the neighbor ask Carl to sit down and just play a game of fetch or of catch. Now, when a lot of people, we play catch with dogs, we go 1, 2, and the dog's like, where did it go? And then it hits him in the head. So you just do 1 and have it a good toss. All Carl has to do is open his mouth and make sure it's a long enough throw that Carl is not outside his reach, because that would be frustrating. Now, when the guest comes over, they need to make sure that they're quiet. They don't have sudden movements. No direct eye contact with Carl, at least at first, until we're playing fetch, because that'd be a challenge. And a cough or a sneeze, or somebody's not going to listen to you, or they're really high energy, that's not the person we want to do this. We want to create positive associations, hopefully without Carl reacting at all. Now, he's probably going to be reacting at first, but then he'll settle down. And the idea is he'll practice settling down faster and faster. Now, you could also, once he's settled down, give him a bully stick or a marrow bone or a cow's knee or something like that. So every time the guests come over, I get this really high value item that I never get at any other time. Ergo, after a while, I kind of like it when guests come over because good things happen. So basically, the guest is going to come over and the guest is going to tell Carl to sit. If Carl doesn't sit, they turn away and continue their conversation with you in a kind of subdued tone. Now, I can watch Carl have a corner of his eye, because I'm guessing at some point he's going to sit down on his own. As soon as he does, the guest should turn and throw a treat to Carl. And Carl, if he catches it, come up with a word that says, you can just say catch if you want, but try to come up with something funny. And then basically, if the dog gets up, have the guest tell Carl to sit again. We want Carl to practice listening to the guest and being rewarded for something good happening to the guest. But Carl was able to achieve this with enough distance where the guardians can feel comfortable, the guest feels comfortable, and Carl also can't get to them. Leashes sometimes help dogs give up a little bit of control because they know they can't get to them. You probably forget it first. Now, if he's lunging, wait. And you might have a couple situations where the guest comes over and just sits there and just sits quietly and kind of is sideways to him. Front-facing is confrontational to dogs, sideways is approachable. So ideally, you would like to have the guest facing the third window here. So we're offering the guest Carl's side, or offering Carl the guest side. Now, I don't know if you caught me at the door, but I yawned quite a bit. That's a calming signal. You can also scratch the floor and sniff, but that kind of looks weird when humans do it. So every once in a while, Carl gets really excited, have him give a and be a little bit vocal like that, don't over dramatic. That can help Carl relax a little bit as well. And what we like to achieve is Carl being nice and relaxed and just chill. Now, that first visit, we want to do this, and Before the guest is going to leave, the guest is going to throw Carl, maybe take about 5 treats, maybe take 5 treats and tear them in half and throw them over here. And so Carl's now looking for these things. While they do that, the guest silently gets up and walks around and leaves the house. So we're preceding the movement with a positive reinforcer. So Carl's more just interested in distracting and getting all these things. Another thing you could use is shredded cheese, because it's all over the place. He's got to work to get it, and he's more interested in this. And the guest is moving further and further away, which is kind of what Carl wants. And then they leave. And then as soon as they leave, if there is a marrow bone or something like that, it should be removed. So the only time I get it is with the presence of the guest. And I would like to have the guest, and if he couldn't play catch, the next time when the guest comes over, they can sit down. And then when Carl sits, tell him to sit. Or when Carl's relaxed, tell him to sit. Grab your treats, toss. Do this with about 15 or 20 treats. And, and ask Carl to sit, and then ask him to chill. And ask him to sit, and ask him to chill. If he chills, maybe we'll roll the treat over. But the idea is we want Carl to practice listening to the guest, obeying the guest, and having good things happen. Now, when the guest is doing this, again, I'd like the guest kind of like this. When they're engaging with Carl, I'd like to be kind of a sideways toss, not a front-facing. And if you're looking at Carl in the eyes and he starts staring at you, just kind of avert your gaze, yawn. You can kind of offer kind of squinty eyes, like sleepy eyes. That's kind of a calming thing for dogs as well. Now, some of the things we're going to look out for Carl, his warning signs. Dogs have hackles on their back. Usually we're right around their shoulder blades here, around their butt, but sometimes it goes the whole deal. When those goes up, those are like goose pimples for us. We can't really control them, but they happen when we're cold in certain things. You're also going to be looking for a stare. Often staring directly or staring like this. This is almost worse at times when the dog's looking directly at it. If Carl's refusing to look at the person, he's saying, I don't like you, I don't want you being in here, that's fine. Don't try to engage when he's doing that. If he's breathing really heavy, he's got his mouth open, it looks like he's smiling, that's actually not a smile. That's stress, and he's trying to cool himself down. A lot of people confuse it with smile. Holding the breath, also a big warning. Getting stiff, tail going straight up, or in an upward pattern. Straight up is more of a warning or more concerning. But we'd like to see the tail, if this is the spine and this is the dog's head, we like to see the tail like this. Now, he has kind of a curved tail, so it kind of has that rounded, but we'd like to see it kind of going like this, or going in circles or figure eights. That's kind of more positive. And so also dilated pupils, also signs of stress and anxiety. Licking the lips and yawning. Although yawning can be also a calming signal. So if you see Carl doing this sort of things, we want to redirect him. This wouldn't be a bad time for one of the guardians, if he starts staring at the person, that'd be a good time to toss a treat over here. I'm guessing he's probably at some point he's going to finally start just hanging out here. Well, the nice thing about this is the table kind of blocks a little bit of his vision. Now remember, anytime the guest is going to move, we want to precede the movement by throwing a plethora of little treats so that Carl has to look for them and he's distracted. And we precede the movement with those. So after a while, that becomes a positive. And the dog is comfortable with people moving around because they're paying a little bit of a tribute to him. Now, we'd like to gradually start elongating and having people here, but if the whole point of this, the most important thing, is that Carl's calm throughout the whole time. Now, ideally, it would be nice, like I said, at some of these situations, we're going to have Carl there at the door, and we're going to toss the treat and get him used to doing that independent of people at the door. And we want to keep on repping that until, even when the person is at the door, we say beach, and he does come over, or whatever the word is. I can't remember what I said earlier. But put a Post-it note here so you know what the note is. But ideally, what we'd like to see is we exercise him first, we precede the most, and before the person comes in, you could also, and cheese is something we do use a lot for bat training. So get some shredded cheese, and then basically, when somebody goes over to answer the door, shake it around on the ground, and let Carl get into it, and then have somebody open the door. Now, we can also set this up for success by helping him practice independent of a guest. So maybe we do a pretend knock, Carl comes over here, we attach this, we have somebody here with cheese, and somebody else goes over the door and just jiggles the handle of the door. Carl's gonna get excited. And so we're not even opening the door. All we're doing is jiggling, making the sound of the handle jiggling. And so if he gets really excited, we could drop a treat here. And when he licks up the treat, then jiggle the handle. This is literally what I did about 3 hours ago. And it gets to the point where the dog doesn't even look up at the handle anymore because the jiggling in the handle means that there's treats or cheese on the ground. Then we go to the deadbolt, and we do the same thing with the deadbolt. So we're breaking down answering the door ritual into individual steps and helping Carl practice each individual step along the way, one at a time, and we're not moving the next step until he gets the first step right, and this is done independent of somebody at the door. Eventually we get to the point where you can open the door, you open it just a crack. And then we drop it, and then if that's the case, drop the treat. But when you're doing these things, you're dropping the treat or the cheese first, then you're triggering the stimulus. After a while, you can reverse it, but at first, we need to be providing the reinforcer first. And first, you're just going to open the door, close it. Drop more cheese, open the door, close it. And eventually, you can open it a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. And what we're doing is helping him practice all the stimulation that happens at the door, independent of a guest coming through, and helping him have a positive interaction with it. Then eventually, we do have the guest that comes in, and when the guest comes in, as soon as Carl sees them, drop a little cheese here. So you're going to have somebody here with Carl. And drop a cheese or whatever so Carl looks here, and you're going to give the guest a whole bunch of those treats. So before they come in, as soon as the door opens, Carl at this point should be pretty relaxed because this is now a positive interaction, and we practice a whole bunch of times without anybody coming in. So the guest comes in, what they're going to do is they're going to throw a bunch of, probably not cheese from that distance, a bunch of treats, and they're going to be all over the place. And Carl's going to be, we're going to get him, and the guest's going to come in very casually and very slowly. No eye contact. And then if Carl at any point stops and stares at them, they need to stop, grab another bundle of treats and toss them again, let him go for that. And if he doesn't, and he just stares at them, just wait. And kind of look down and just be completely motionless. And if Carl is barking or reacting, we can kind of turn to the side and yawn a little bit. But the idea is we want to come in very progressively, and then we're going to sit basically right where the camera is. At this point, Carl, like I said, should be much more relaxed about it and more interested in the treats. And after you practice enough, and again, don't practice this stuff until we're about a month into you guys' practice or the other stuff. But after this starts happening enough, he's like, I had it all wrong. When people come to the house, they're not here to steal our TV. They're here to give me treats. These are treat delivery people that I had them all wrong. I had the wrong perception of them. But again, by taking these individual steps and doing it one at a time, I guess in retrospect, I was thinking originally this video is going to be more for the guests, and you could have the guests watch it as well. But this is really more for you guys. So eventually, if we do it right, Carl should eventually get to the point where people can come in, he stares at them, but doesn't react at all. Now, again, they want to play a little bit of fetch with him, and when Carl sits or lies down, we're going to grab a handful of treats, throw the handful of treats, and while he's getting them, they're going to get up and quietly leave. No salutations, no big, long goodbyes. From the time they throw the treats, by the time they get up, it should be less than 30 seconds before they're out the door. And Carl gets there, he's like, oh, you're gone. And again, we set this whole thing up by exercising him first. And then after a while, we want to start elongating this. So keep an eye, keep a count, or get a stopwatch or use your watch and start a timer. And then we wait and see how long it takes before Carl sits down. And don't tell him to sit. We just want him to do it on his own. When he sits or lays down here, he's telling me I'm relaxed enough in the situation at this point to take a more subordinate or a less authoritative position. And then look at your watch. Okay, that was 5 minutes. And the idea is we'd like to have that period of time decrease. Once we get to the point where he's sitting or lying down with less than 30 seconds, then we want to start lengthening the length of time that the person is here. But again, as soon as he sits or lies down, they're going to throw the handful of treats and get up and leave. And then we should see that happen shorter and shorter. And then once we get to less than 30 seconds, then once he sits and lies down, we're going to stay another minute before we throw the treats and get up and leave. And then 2 minutes and 3 minutes. And if you go from 3 to 5 and at 4 minutes he gets worked up, then back up and practice the previous step. So the idea is we're just setting Carl up for success by creating positive associations and then gradually start elongating it. And the biggest mistake people make is they jump from like 5 minutes to 15 minutes. So always keep a counter or a stopwatch or whatever it is so you know where you're at. And I would add this stuff to your exercise journal or maybe just start a visitor's journal. But again, don't start practicing this stuff until you're about 2 or 3 weeks in. So really not until we get to the beginning of March. Now, I'd like to come back and we'll talk about that off camera. But I think if you could do this, and maybe by the time I come in, maybe you had 1 or 2 people who will listen to you, who have a calm, mellow energy, and are not afraid of a dog. And that's why that chain will help because they already shouldn't be afraid of dogs. And then you can explain, look, he's on a special collar, he can't get out, and a chain leash that's anchored in the foundation of the house. You're safe as long as you sit in this chair. Cool. So you guys are relaxed, the guest is relaxed, and eventually Carl will start to emulate that relaxed nature as well. Well, this is a very unusual video that I did, but about a lot of things that you can do to set the dog up for success so it can learn to practice being calm when guests arrive.